And we are live. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. My name is Lance Sanderson. I am your host as always. And joining me as usual is my good friend and colleague. He is your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, man? How you doing up there in Alaska?
Doing really good, man. Actually just got a brand new couch, got it delivered and everything. And unfortunately, that was actually the reason why we had to delay the podcast a little bit. But we got that. I'm super excited that we finally have a new couch. And as always, I'm super excited to be here talking Broncos, having all you guys joining us and just asking whatever questions that come to mind. Super excited about it. And the topic today is actually something that's very exciting for me because about an article I wrote.
Yeah, the mock offseason, your last mock offseason for the Broncos, heading into free agency, which starts on Tuesday. Legal tampering period starts on Sunday at 12 o'clock noon. I believe that's Eastern or Mountain time, so something like that. Yeah. Anyways, so this article that you have is very interesting. It's always fun to get your kind of inside takes, just the information that you've gleaned from your sources in Dove Valley. Now, Erick, you've kind of gotten off on the right foot here, obviously, with the exclusive rights free agents like, Tim Patrick, Jake Rogers. Let's see. Let me pull this up here really fast. You see Trey Marshall, Deontay Spencer, guys like that, just the cheap guys that are going to come back, obviously short-term kind of guys, bottom of the roster players. Obviously, those are going to be the guys that you're going to bring back on the cheap to fill out the roster. Elijah Wilkinson, Mike Purcell as the restricted free agents to tender. But Devontae Bosby as well, a restricted free agent cornerback. We're going to be pretty interested to see how his development comes back out of that injury. Outside of that, going into just the other homegrown free agents, obviously with the franchise tag of Justin Simmons, has there been anything that you've heard as far as a long-term contract that has come, in the last little bit of time? Is there anything we're going to be hearing about here directly?
With Justin Simmons?
Yes.
No, my assumption is, based off what I've heard, is that they were trying to get a deal done, but they decided to basically put talks on hold, use the franchise tag, and then reevaluate that because they now have until I think it's July 15th to get a long-term deal done with him. So they can go, they have that, they have the money set aside for that. They can go focus on free agency, they can focus on the draft, depending on if the year starts off on time, of course, because that might still get delayed. The draft might still get delayed. So that might play a little bit of an issue with it. But basically it's sit and wait. They can work on the long-term deal a little bit later.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense. And like we've said earlier on this podcast, this is not necessarily something that needs to get done right now, and it's probably not going to be something that gets done right now. But we're going to see something. Deadlines do spur action in the NFL. John Elway has a long history with using the franchise tag, waiting till what is seemingly the very last minute. Demaryius Thomas, Von Miller, prior players that have gotten the franchise tag and then waited until July 14th, July 15th, until the deal was actually struck. Now, outside of Justin Simmons, I did see something just a little bit interesting regarding just the homegrown free agents in Derek Wolfe and Shelby Harris. Now, both of those guys obviously are upcoming free agents, and you chose to not go in that direction and instead go towards the free agent pool and bring in a couple of guys in Leonard Williams and Michael Pierce out of Baltimore. So what are the chances that actually happens where Derek Wolfe is left on the outside looking in?
I think it's very likely. I think at this point the door is basically shut on Shelby Harris at this point. And with Derek Wolfe, I think that the Broncos, they're willing to let him test the market, see what he gets, and then reevaluate from there. And from what I've heard, I think he's going to get a little bit more than what the Broncos are going to be willing to give him. So that's one reason why I decided not to go that way. I would love to see Derek Wolfe return. He's been my favorite player on the Broncos ever since he joined the Broncos, ever since before that. Big fan of his prior to the draft leading up to it. But I just don't see it happening right now. Of course, that can change. Maybe his market's not as hot as the word is going around, and what he's getting offered from other teams is even less than what Denver's willing to go. And if that happens, then I could see Denver jumping back in.
Well, it sounds to me like the way that he has been asking, not necessarily asking for money, but the way that he spoke out on social media was $9.5 million. The amount that he made this year seems to be his floor. That's what he's looking for at the very least. So that could be a big reason as to why the Broncos are looking on and moving on from his contract. So I understand why you would go that way. Now, specifically to Michael Pierce here, what intrigues you about the upside to him playing in Vic Fangio's defense?
Well, he's just a little bit better version of Mike Purcell. And what he does best is he controls the gaps in the running game, and he can even has a little bit of burst to shoot the gaps and get into the backfield and make a play. But one reason why I decided to go get him is because Denver does need more help at the nose tackle position than Mike Purcell, and they need somebody who can offer up a little bit more as a pass rusher. And Michael Pierce, well, he's not a great interior pass rusher. If he was, he'd be a super expensive free agent and unlikely to happen. But he offers more than what Mike Purcell does as a pass rusher, which is the biggest reason why I went that route. Getting that nose tackle, I mean, he's only going to be playing about 50% of snaps anyways. So just somebody who can come in, and if he gets caught in there in obvious passing downs, he can still offer a little bit of help to push the interior.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. Now, with the Broncos needing somebody to come in and add some pass coverage for this Broncos defense at the linebacker position, there are three names that are commonly tossed around here in let's see, Nick Kwiatkowski, Joe Schobert from Cleveland, and the guy that you have coming in, Cory Littleton from the Los Angeles Rams. Now, out of the three, you have Littleton, and what is the biggest reason as for why?
Basically, the biggest reason for that is Littleton fits more of what Vic Fangio asks his linebackers to do. Now, Todd Davis was one of, I think, 3 or 4 linebackers, I can't remember the exact number, that played over 100 snaps in 3 different spots on the defense. He played over 100 snaps in the slot, off ball, and I can't remember where the other spot was. So you're looking at somebody who can come in and do that. Nick Kwiatkowski, he doesn't really offer that. He's got a little bit more limited range. He's not the athlete that Littleton is. And when you get to Joe Schobert, he too doesn't have that kind of versatility. He's not going to be a guy who you can move out and scheme out into the slot and still be relied on. Cory Littleton, he is a guy that offers that up a little bit more. And I think it was last year or in 2018. So 2 years ago, he played over 100 snaps in the slot. I might be mistaken on that. It might be a different year, but he's a guy that has definitely shown the ability to go out into the slot and play very well there. And I think that's what Denver's going to be looking at, is because Vic Fangio likes to have his defense be versatile. And so if you can get a linebacker out into the slot and get pressure with fewer players and give him help, then it just opens up Vic Fangio's defensive playbook even more.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And it actually kind of pairs nicely with, once we get into the mock draft portion of this, another player that you have, and it was a guy that we took last night in our mock draft that we did. Go check that out, guys. If you haven't got a chance to go watch that, a lot of fun. We really enjoyed doing that and having you guys on the show with us. Now, another defensive signing on the interior of the defensive line, Leonard Williams. And with Chris Jones being franchise tagged by the Kansas City Chiefs, there's another couple of guys out there, Marcel Darius being one. You've got Gerald McCoy, I believe, is available as well. What about Leonard Williams? So you said that he had, 22 total sacks over the course of his career. He hasn't quite lived up to that number 5 draft pick hype that he had going in, 2015, 2016, something like that. I can't remember exactly what year it was. But Leonard Williams does offer a lot of potential on the interior of that defensive line. As far as the fit in Vic Fangio's scheme, where do you see him lining up alongside whatever Draymond Jones and Von Miller in that kind of role? Is he a 3 tech, a 5 tech, or can you line him up at the nose tackle position?
He's a guy that when you bring him in, you're just going to be looking at him as a 5 tech and move inside into the 3 tech spot when you go into your sub package looks. And that's exactly what the Broncos need, somebody who can sit there and go and get that interior pressure, and he can. Denver will need him to bounce back. He did have a rough year this year playing for the 2 New York teams, but he still has a lot of upside. He's still really young. I think he's only 25 years old. And so it's still plenty of NFL career ahead of him. So he's definitely a guy that's still worth looking at. I think that there are other circumstances playing for the Giants and the Jets that caused him to struggle, especially with the Jets. Their scheme, they had a drastic change with their scheme, and he just wasn't the best fit for it. So basically, you're putting him in a better scheme. You're putting him in his position to succeed. And Vic Fangio has this knack for just developing guys. I mean, Akeem Hicks, Chicago Bears were his 3rd team or 2nd team that he spent time with.
Team, I believe.
And look what Vic Fangio did with him. I mean, just in general, and cornerbacks and defensive line tend to have a resurgence in their career when playing in the Vic Fangio defense because of how easy it can be to just basically execute things at those 2 positions.
Yeah. So are you thinking something along the lines of what Justin Smith, I believe, was the one in San Francisco, the interior defensive lineman that played under Vic Fangio when the San Francisco 49ers went to the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Ravens, 2014, I believe?
So basically, yes.
No,
he'd
12.
kind of be offering the same thing as Justin Smith did, but the issue is that their role would be a little bit different. So his role's not going to be exactly the same, but they're going to do the same lineup in the same spots. Justin Smith was at 3 tech in the sub packages, 5 tech in the base, and that's what you're going to get out of Leonard Williams. Although the role will be a little bit different.
Yeah. Now, the rest of your offseason signings, as far as the free agency period is concerned, obviously falls in line with what Benjamin Albright had lined out earlier, how the Broncos are going to buy a defense and then draft an offense. And the final player that we're going to talk about here before we move to your mock draft is Prince Amukamara, the former Chicago Bears cornerback who just got released, and there are very heavy ties. Have you heard anything as far as a mutual interest between Prince Amukamara and the Broncos?
Yes, I have heard things that there is a mutual interest between the two sides, and the biggest reasoning for that is just the Vic Fangio connection. Obviously, he went in Chicago, got one of the best years out of Prince Amukamara in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, just 2018, where Prince Amukamara was one of the best corners, top 10, I think, in the NFL that season, statistically, and the tape was there to back it up. And it's just because the Vic Fangio scheme is so easy for corners, and it just takes a lot of pressure off of them. It puts a little bit more pressure on the safeties to give them help over the top, and a little bit more pressure on your pass rushers up front because of Vic Fangio's philosophy of winning with as few pass rushers as possible. So there is definitely mutual interest there, and I'd be more shocked at this point if Prince Amukamara ends up in a different uniform other than a Broncos uniform.
Yeah, it would be kind of surprised. And now I've seen some comments about Xavier Rhodes, Byron Jones, as far as another cornerback that the Broncos could potentially bring in as well. Is there any more value with Prince Amukamara than there would be with the other two outside of the money impact?
Outside of the money impact, there's really not more value with Prince Amukamara than you are with Byron Jones there is with Xavier Jones. Xavier Jones was terrible this last year, and he's been on a decline over the last few years. And as much as Vic Fangio's defense has a history of helping cornerbacks, as I said last night, I just don't think that I've seen enough watching Xavier Rhodes to really bet on him kind of having a resurgence. If I'm looking for that kind of corner, I'm going to be looking at Eli Apple. I think he's shown a little bit more potential. He has more upside, and he's still actually developing as a player. So I'd be willing to bet on him a little bit more than that. But with Byron Jones, he's a great corner. He's definitely worth the $17 million, and I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up cracking over $18 million from a team, because the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles are going to go crazy trying to bring him in. He's such a talented player, such versatility, and my biggest complaint is I just wish his ball skills were a little bit better, but he just does a good job shutting down receivers.
Yeah, and I mean with the Eagles and the Giants going after Byron Jones the way that they could potentially be doing, that would be a very similar move to what Broncos country wanted with the Broncos going after Chris Jones. Not only does it strengthen a weakness that they are potentially going to have after free agency hits, but they're also going to weaken a division rival in that sense, taking Byron Jones off of the Dallas Cowboys and putting him onto, let's just say, the Philadelphia Eagles, for instance. That's a huge win on two fronts there for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, getting to the mock draft, last night we did our mock draft with all of our listeners, and after reading through your article, it's kind of easy to see that you were not necessarily guiding people in the right direction, but kind of like really guiding them to your kind of thinking here. Obviously, we have Henry Ruggs. You traded up for the wide receiver, traded up with the New York Jets to number 11 to draft Henry Ruggs. But then your second round pick, and you were slapping the table pretty hard for Justin Madubuike, the interior defensive lineman from Texas A&M. Why is that?
Well, with Justin Madubuike, he has the athleticism to come in and contribute right away, which is something that the Broncos need. I mean, as every Broncos fan is aware, Shelby Harris, Adam Gotsis, and Derek Wolfe are all impending free agents, and I'm at this point not expecting any of those three back. You have to restock that line. And Justin Madubuike, bringing that raw athleticism that he brings, that defensive coaches love to have, getting him to work with Bill Kohler is you're not getting a guy who can just come in and help out right away this year in a sparing role, which is what Madubuike would be, probably lining up in this scenario that we're talking about here with my offseason mock draft. He'd be behind Leonard Williams and Draymond Jones, but he's getting experience. He's getting that time to develop and grow under the coaching of Bill Kohler, who is one of the best, if not the best, defensive line coaches in the NFL. And so that is why what with that pick, I was willing to go with a guy who is not a immediate starter, but he's an immediate impact player. And I think a lot of fans have an issue with just not trying to figure out the right way to put this, is that it's not always about immediate starters. Sometimes you have to look at the immediate impact, because with the way this NFL is going, more players that are considered depth are seeing more time, especially at safety, at cornerback, because you're constantly rotating your secondary. You're doing that a lot on the defensive line too. So that's one big thing as to why I was going that route with Justin Madubuike.
No, and that's a fair point. I mean, you're seeing a lot of that, and a lot of more versatile guys that can play all three downs. So not really just the interior defensive lineman specialists, the interior defensive lineman pass rushers specifically, or like run stuffers. Guys that can play on all three downs, rotate through, and keep a cohesive unit on the front of the defense. Also in the back end as well, solid cover guys that are versatile, can cover in man and zone coverage schemes. So I understand where you're going from with that. Now I got a question here coming on. And it's from Jody Moncrief, and he says, Eric, you are not a fan of protecting Locke. We need to fix this O-line. Now, before we go into that, I'm going to go into your third round pick with Matthew Pert, the offensive tackle specifically out of UConn. Now, as you outlined in the article, there's a lot of people that are thinking that he can move inside and play at the guard position. I'm kind of in the same line of thinking with you. I don't see the ability for him to slide inside. The dude is really tall, really long, and I think that that's a big thing. He doesn't use a lot of very good leverage on the inside and not a lot of functional strength. He's a mover, and he's very long and lengthy and can get out on the outside. That's why I think that you're kind of going in that same direction, where he's more specifically as an offensive tackle, a rotational development tackle that can fill in for Juwan James or potentially move over to the left side and play for Garrett Bulls should something happen on that front. Now, Eric, speak just a little bit more about Matthew Pert for us.
Well, to answer the question, it's not that I'm not a fan of protecting Drew Lock. It's just the fact that I'm aware that after in the 5 games Drew Lock started over the NFL, that the Denver Broncos had a top 8 offensive line. I'm aware of the fact that internally the Broncos seem very not necessarily content, but have a lot of faith in their offensive line, as it kind of looks now, with Patrick Morris as their center, with Elijah Wilkinson at guard, with James, with Bulls, and of course Dalton Reisner. They have a lot of faith in them. Garrett Bulls, after the bye week, was the number 1 tackle in the NFL last year, allowing, I think, the second fewest pressures, and he was definitely, he was a little bit high in the in penalties still, which is the big concern with him, of course, is a bigger concern with him is the penalties, which is definitely getting cut back under Mike Munchak. But we saw evidence and clear proof that Garrett Bulls was improving under the coaching of Mike Munchak, and I'm going to be curious to see what he will take with that next step. So it's not that I'm not a fan of it, it's just that I think that the Broncos are content with who they have. And in this mock offseason, I added Matthew Pert because that gives them that developmental tackle that Mike Munchak gets to work with as well. And if James gets hurt, you can just turn to Matthew Pert, who's a guy who can come in and actually play a little bit this year if need be. He's got enough tools and traits in him to be a solid guy in that. And I see that you add that Bulls faced 0 elite pass rushers in those games, and that's not true. Is in those games,
he faced Everson Griffin.
Everson Griffin with the Minnesota Vikings was actually the best pass rusher in the NFL last year, and Garrett Bulls essentially shut him down. He faced off some pretty good pass rushers, not elite, but pass rushers against the Bills. Texans, no. Against the Chiefs, they have some good pass rushers. He helped shut them down. So it's not, he did face some good pass rushers. It's not that, it's just that base stat. There was actually good pass rushers that he was facing against and shut him down.
Yeah, let's see. Excuse me. Frank Clark absolutely had a huge postseason run along with Chris Jones. What's the other guy over there? His name, Alex Okafor, was the other one that had another really good year this year. Obviously if you're talking elite pass rushers, there's 4 in the entire NFL that you could really consider truly elite guys. Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Von Miller, and Khalil Mack. Like, those are really, if you're talking about the elite, the top tier pass rushers. After that, you got a bunch of guys like the Everson Griffins, the Frank Clark of the world. Go back a couple of years, Cameron Wake. There's a lot of guys. quality guys. It's not that he didn't face any real pass rush threat. I mean, there's a lot of really good edge rushers in the NFL. So it's not that he didn't face off against the top tier guys, Khalil Mack, Von Miller. I mean, he still faced against, really, really good players.
And I see Lions 0, Texans 0, Raiders 0, Lions with Trey Flowers, the Raiders with both the guy from, I can't think of his name, but had him last year, had a huge year last year. And then they also had the rookie, the one that they surprised everybody.
Two rookies. They had two rookies, Max Crosby and Cleveland Ferrell. Yeah, Max Crosby.
They definitely had the talent there. And, I mean, if you're just looking at elite pass rushers, so few tackles face elite pass rushers. As you stated, there are just so few of them. But, yeah, Garrett Bulls, he faced good pass rushers in those last, 9-10 games that the Broncos played, and he did very well against them. And, again, he was one of the best tackles in the NFL during that time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like with the Broncos offensive line. There's a lot to dislike as well. Obviously, the holding penalties with Bulls, the injury concerns with Juwan James. It's, obviously with the Patrick Morris is kind of a wild card here. Elijah Wilkinson looks a lot better at right guard than he does at right tackle. And Dalton Reisner looks like he could be not necessarily the kid from Notre Dame that went to Indianapolis, the Big Q. Maybe not that kind of a player, but he's definitely a Pro Bowl kind of a player at the left tackle or left guard position. So there's a lot to work with.
And before we move on here, just to add, Chris Jones did play in that second game against Kansas City. He didn't play in the first one. Yes, that is correct. Now we're going to skip. Just briefly, your next two picks fell in line with what we took in the mock draft last night in Terrell Burgess and Akeem Davis Gaither. So we talked about those guys just a little bit, and I want to go down just a little ways here. Devin Duvernay, another speedy wide receiver out of Texas. Brandon Mann, a guy that we took last night in our sixth round pick, I believe, that's punter out of Texas A&M. Then you got another offensive line pick, Tremaine Ankrum, the offensive lineman out of Clemson. I'm not necessarily familiar with him. Why don't you speak on him just a little bit? I think he was the left tackle for Clemson this last year. Might have been the right tackle. Whatever it is, he played tackle last year, and he's going to be moving inside. His size and length isn't even that much of a fit for guard, so he's definitely moving all the way inside to center. And that's kind of what I have him in there as, and I think I talk about it in the article too, that this is looking at him to be projected to moving to center, which, again, is his best spot in the NFL. He's got some of the traits that you're looking for there, but definitely a developmental guy. Would come in and compete with Patrick Morris and Austin Schlottman, two guys that the Denver Broncos coaching staff really like, which is one reason why I was a little waiting on a center in the draft, just because they seem very, not necessarily content, but very willing to go forward and get and work with Patrick Morris as the starting center. He is a big Mike Munchak guy, and when it comes to this offensive line, Mike Munchak guys matter a lot. He has a lot of control over the offensive line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't he? He's one of the best offensive linemen in all of NFL history, and he's a great offensive line coach, probably the best now that Dante Scarnecchia retired from New England. I mean, Mike Munchak might be the best offensive line coach in all of the NFL, so why wouldn't he have a say in that? Now, before we move on to some of these questions, because they're rolling in at a massive clip right now. You went in free agency and you signed Jordan Howard, formerly of Chicago and of Philadelphia, to be that kind of dynamic runner in between the tackles that can take a little bit of the heat off of Phillip Lindsay and also off of Royce Freeman as well, and add some versatility in the passing game. But then you also went down in the 7th round and drafted Raymond Calais, I believe, out of Louisiana. Louisiana Lafayette. Now, in the article, you gave a shout out to Nick Kendall, our colleague, saying that the Broncos need a massive infusion of speed, and Raymond Calais brings that. Now, outside of just the speed element, what is the biggest factor of his game that speaks out to you?
So Raymond Calais is actually a tremendous player in space, and that's the biggest thing, is that he's a guy with that speed. You want to get him the ball in space. I can't remember what it was. One of the bowl events, NFLPA, Shrine, Senior Bowl, I can't remember which one, but he showed off his speed and his ability in space. And then again at the combine, he had a lot of, I think it was at the combine. But anyways, he over time, he has gotten a lot of teams interested in him because of that speed. And here's the thing is, at running back, you want to stack speed on top of speed with the way the NFL is going and get guys who can be pass catchers and make plays in in space, which is exactly what Raymond Clay can do. He's a compliment to Philip Lindsay and is a compliment to Jordan Howard, which I really wouldn't be shocked if the Broncos end up making that move. There's some mutual interest there, and the Broncos are looking pretty heavy at that spot in free agency, looking at getting a veteran guy like that. But moving on, I just want to get these out here real quick. Terry Randall comes in with a $5 donation. Thank you, Terry, for that. Yes. Article on Robert Hunt linked to the Broncos. What are your thoughts and where would you draft him? Great tie, Eric. Thank you for the tie. It's one of 2 Broncos ties that I have that I rotate show to show. And as for Robert Hunt, I like him. I'm actually a really big fan of him. I think he has a 3rd-round grade for me, and that's right about where I'd be looking at taking him, of course, because 3rd-round grade, I'm not going to be looking grade a guy 3rd round and look at him at taking the 1st round. It's just not how it works. But yeah, that's what I'd be looking at. Moves not the best, but very well for his size and brings plenty of power, which is one reason why I'd be looking at him. And then again, Terry Randall came in. I just got to scroll.
I got it right here. Yep. He says, slam the like button, peeps. Yeah, make sure you get down there, slam that like button, share it out with everybody. Make sure that everybody gets to see what we do on a weekly basis for you guys. And not only just us. I mean, we've got the Building the Broncos podcast and also the Huddle Up podcast. We come to you guys once a day. So make sure you guys are getting this out to everybody. Terry, we do appreciate you. Thank you very much. Good sir. Now, let's see here. Let's go to some of these questions here. See if I can find. There was a couple of really good ones. I'm gonna have to just look at this really fast. I do apologize. Terry's going to come in really fast. He's going to say, how much do signing bonuses count towards the cap? And Eric, while I look at another one, I'm going to let you go ahead and take this question away.
So what a signing bonus, how that is against the cap is, say it is a $15 million signing bonus on a 3-year deal. Basically, it gets split up and prorated over the 3 years of the contract. So in year 1, it'd be $5 million of that signing bonus against cap. Year 2, $5 million, and year 3, $5 million. And then what happens if, say, after the first year, the team cuts him, they now have to take all $10 million of the signing bonus left from year 2 and 3 and carry that on the cap as well. So that's just how signing bonuses work. They just are prorated over the length of the contract.
Yeah. Let's see here. Bawana Beast had a really good question, specifically right in your line of fire. Here it is for you. Is Matt Hennessy, interior offensive lineman, I believe Boston College, an NFL-ready player?
I think he is. I think he's a guy that can come in and start day one of those centers that can, and in multiple schemes too. He's a good mover, has good power, and good strength. So he is definitely a guy that I think can be and fit into basically any scheme. And I think the Broncos are going to be running a little bit more of a what's the right word? A mixture of a scheme with some power, some gap, and some zone concepts in their offense next year. So he would definitely be a tremendous fit for the Broncos.
Yeah. Another good one here. Kendall Fuller. Speaking of weakening an AFC West division rival in the Kansas City Chiefs, is Kendall Fuller a good idea for the Broncos to go target as kind of a upper tier but not upper money kind of a player for this Broncos secondary?
I don't think he's really upper tier. I think this last year he actually really struggled watching him play. And I think that noticing Bronco fans, because I'm a big fan of Bashaud Breeland, I see a lot of reactions about how Bashaud Breeland was terrible this last year. He was actually really good. He was the best corner in that Kansas City Chiefs secondary, and Kendall Fuller was the third best. I mean, West, Ware, Chandark, whatever it is, the undrafted free agent they had. Yep. He had a tremendous season as well. Yes. And Kendall Fuller was their weakest link in that secondary that they had. So as a guy that maybe on a cheaper deal, seeing if he can rebound, I definitely take a look. But basically outside of that, a 1-year prove-it deal, I'm going to be looking at somebody else.
Yeah. So just specifically towards what the Chiefs were trying to do on defense, does that kind of line up with what the Broncos like to do? I know they like to run a lot of man principles, but they don't task a lot of secondary coverage with their linebackers and safety. So it is a lot of press coverage on the outside. Could the scheme switch over to what the Broncos are doing with Vic Fangio kind of help revitalize that kind of a career?
It definitely could. And that is actually one of the reasons why, in my opinion, studying Vic Fangio and his defense is what helped bring around the resurgence of careers, multiple corner careers, including Prince Amukamara, was because of what his scheme asked them to do. It's a lot less pressure on them, pressure on the cornerback. If you're able to take that off, that's a tremendous help to them. And Denver has the talent at safety to help out those help out those corners. So I definitely think that the difference in scheme could really help out Kendall Fuller.
Yeah. Now, Beast comes back in with another question here. Luke Joeckel for a swing guard, former number 2 or number 3 overall pick in that bad 2013 NFL draft. Vet minimum contract to come in and play the right guard position, or are you looking elsewhere?
I'd pass on him. I'd look elsewhere. I think that the draft has a lot of potential guards in there that I would just be looking at them instead of spending any kind of money on Luke Joeckel. There's been some stuff that I've heard about him that just kind of sour my opinion on him. And guys, just real quick, we are running a little bit long. Sorry we spent so much time talking about the off-season mock to start. Wasn't our intentions. So if you guys have any questions, now's the time to get them in before we jump out of here. We do also want to get out of here a little bit early because we ran so long last night.
Yeah, to keep you guys long again would be kind of a disservice to y'all. One more quick comment. I kind of agree with it, but also at the same time, I also agree with Chris Harris Jr. in this kind of a situation. Chris Harris Jr. is salty and being toxic for no reason just because we got AJ Bouye in the trade. Now, yes and no. A big part of this, I understand that Broncos fans are kind of scorned right now. Chris Harris Jr. Is looking to get paid what he thinks he deserves. And he took a hometown discount from the Broncos the last time around. In fact, he actually signed his contract that he's getting ready to get out of right now on my birthday so many years ago. So that short, really long-term but short kind of money deal that he signed, now he's looking to go get paid. And at 30 years old, 31 years old, kind of had a fall off last year in Vic Fangio's scheme after he did ask for more responsibility and coverage and then kind of failed to live up to the expectations. Now he's looking to get out and the Broncos are looking to move forward. The way that he's going about this kind of a situation and the whole scenario really kind of rubs Broncos fans wrong, but I can't fault the guy. At the same time, he's still a very good cornerback, and he's going to go out and he's going to go get paid. That's just all there is to it. Unfortunately, he's not going to be a Bronco for life. We're just going to have to get over that fact.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it's time for Chris Harris Jr. to get out of Denver. And not that I'm not a fan of his or anything like that, but this is a guy who for a few years had been causing not super problems in the locker room, but there's definitely been some issues there. He was asking for more role. He's asking to take on number 1 receivers leading up to the season. And when it finally happens, he sits there and he turns around saying, "Oh, I never wanted that." That doesn't sit well with me. You asked for it and then you failed there. And now you're just trying to blame the coaches. So that doesn't sit well with me. And there is one comment that I actually wanted to respond to. And it says, "I hope Wilkinson is not an option at right guard. I hate to tell you this, but he's actually the favorite to start at right guard this year. The Broncos coaching staff absolutely loves him. And they wanted him to be moving into guard last year, but James's injury forced him outside. They're looking at bettering their tackle depth so that they can leave Wilkinson inside at guard."
Yeah. Now, there's one more quick question here from Dylan Benach, and then we're going to get out of here, guys. What's up, guys? Great job as usual. I need to know, if you were Elway, what is the most important / crucial hole that you would fill? Now, I'm going to kind of go in the direction, same kind of line of thinking that you were with your mock draft and mock offseason, the interior defensive line. With a lot of the guys that are getting ready to leave, obviously you got Derek Wolfe, Shelby Harris, Adam Gotsis. Mike Purcell as an exclusive rights free agent or restricted free agent, one of the two, is going to be brought back. But there's a lot of room to work with there, and the interior defensive line is probably the biggest sneaky need outside of a secondary kind of running back player. Now, obviously, you've got the wide receiver position. The Broncos need to get more speed, and they need to kind of bolster up the cornerback. But those two areas right there are probably the biggest sneaky needs that I would really want to address, not only in free agency, but also in this draft class.
For me, the two places that I'd be looking at is adding a speedy guy to the receiver position because of how much it can open up the offense and how much you can then use Drew Lock's arm to attack downfield. And, of course, the defensive line. Denver has lacked a true disruptor on their interior defensive line ever since Malik Jackson left. And what they can bring to the defense with what we saw in the Super Bowl run, helping out those edge rushers is just tremendous. It's so much value that you just can't pass up. It's why interior pass rushers are getting more and more valued. And I continue seeing a conversation about Xavier Rhodes in here. Xavier Rhodes is terrible in zone coverage. It's where he's been consistently bad at his whole career. He is a man zone, works best when playing press man, and just struggles outside of that. I don't think that he's a fit at all in the Vic Fangio scheme. And the biggest reason for that is Vic Fangio's scheme, while it does offer up some versatility in how you play, it's a lot of zone concepts, which, as I just stated, does not fit Xavier Rhodes whatsoever. He just doesn't execute zones. He doesn't have the awareness or the instincts to play in zone coverage quite a bit.
Well, and a lot of that just goes to the way that he likes to play. I mean, he's very long, very strong, very physical at the point of attack, and likes to get guys off the line of scrimmage and off their timing with very good hands and good jams at the line of scrimmage. So a press man cover corner scheme, somewhere similar to like what we saw with Wade Phillips. Sure, I could see that in this kind of zone heavy scheme where there's not a lot of tasks. Getting guys that are very aware, very smart, know their coverage assignments, and like to stick to those assignments. That's a big thing with Vic Fangio. Don't freelance. Stick to your assignment. Do what you were supposed to do and play your role. Xavier Rhodes, probably not that kind of a guy. Now, I said we were going to have that last question really fast, but I do got one more because this is a very good one here. Bill 1293 coming in and says, could the Broncos make a run at Graham Glasgow? Troy Rank brought him up.
I think it would all depend on cost. I think if the Broncos are going to be looking at a free agent, that's what it's going to come down to. I think BJ Finney is a lot more likely, and that is partially because of the connection between him and Mike Munchak. But I'm a big fan of Glasgow. I like his game quite a bit. He'd be a big fit into the Broncos offense and what they want to do with his versatility to do both. But it's all going to come down to that cost. I don't see the Broncos willing to spend big because Mike Munchak is a big fan of Patrick Morris and his game. So that's the only concern there is how much is it going to cost compared to other corners like BJ Finney that they could look at bringing in for cheaper and offer up just as much versatility to play multiple spots.
Right. Excuse me, guys. I think, Eric, I think that's pretty much going to do it for us today. Guys, we're going to wrap it up here. Before we get out of here, though, a couple of quick announcements. Next week, I will not be joining the show on Friday or on Saturday. I actually have some very big news. Next Friday is a doctor's appointment for me and my girlfriend to go find out the gender of our child. So we're going to be taking that time to go do that and then go and see my folks down down at their place for the weekend. So I'm going to be getting out of here. Nick Kendall will be filling in for me on Friday. And then Chad Jensen, the host of the Huddle Up podcast, will be joining Eric on Saturday. Topics as of yet are to be determined. So stay tuned to everything that is going on with us. You can follow along with that on Twitter at Sanderson MHH and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also, you guys can follow the show at Dove Valley Deep Diver, at DVDD_pod. And also, let's see here. Let me find this last one. And Eric, I'll let you interject. Also be able to follow at Huddle Up Pod for all of your breaking news and announcements on what is going on with not only Dove Valley Deep Divers, building the Broncos, and of course the Huddle Up podcast. Eric, go ahead.
So just as a part of that announcement is, yes, Nick and Chad will be joining me on Friday and Saturday. Well, Nick on Friday, Chad on Saturday. The topic of discussion right now, the plan is free agency, but with the NFL potentially moving that back, we may be looking at something else. Not sure yet. We will keep you guys informed. But instead of 5:30 Mountain Standard Time, we are going to be moving our time permanently to 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, back that half hour, basically because that is the time that all the other pods go live at, and we just don't want any confusion about that with the timing of it. This way, it's very easy. All the Mile High Huddle podcasts start at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So look for us then. And today, obviously, as I said earlier, the biggest reason why we went a half hour later is because I was getting a new couch. Yeah. And guys, also make sure you guys tell Lance that if it's a boy, to name it Eric.
No, sorry about that. Can't do it, guys.
Come on.
Just one more quick thing. Make sure you guys are washing your hands. Don't touch your nose, mouth, or eyes. And also stay safe. Take care out there. You guys have a great evening. Thank you.